Hello there, Talking Fight fans around the world. Thank you once again for joining Christian, myself, on another episode on the Olympics. Although today we have a very special guest joining us. Jennifer Huggins will be joining us, and Christian's going to take the time to read a very extensive and excellent bio, I must say. And we are very proud to have her join us. So I'll just throw it over to you, Christian.
I do not have time to actually read. Yeah, I do not have the time, and neither do you guys, to read her entire bio. So we're not going to. We're gonna let her do a lot of the talking on this one. Actually, variety is the spice of life is the mantra by which the ball of energy known as Jennifer Huggins lives her life. Now, Jennifer owns and operates the Kingsway Boxing Club in Toronto. She is a 3-star international boxing referee and judge with the AIBA. She is the president of the board of directors for Boxing Ontario. She is also the chief official for Boxing Ontario. She sits on the Gender Equity Advisory Group for Boxing Canada, as well as the Canadian Officials Commission. She also operates the Fight to End Cancer in partnership with Princess Margaret Hospital. And when she's not doing any of these things, she's traveling the world getting sawn in half. So let's bring her on. And find out where she has the time to do all these things.
I'm still in one piece. It's been about a year since I've been sawed in half because of the COVID. Thanks
well, I mean, we're glad to see that you're in one piece, and we're glad that you were able to take the time out of your obviously very busy schedule to find the time to be with us here today. So I guess we should start with the logical in the logical space here, which is of course figure skating.
I guess that would be logical, right? It's on my resume. So
that's where we start. You've always been a competitor, but it didn't begin in the ring. It started off on the ice. So tell us about that.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm in the ring now, actually sitting on the ring right now. But it started off in the rink when I was maybe, I guess it would have been about 5 years old. Very competitive person. I think my parents recognized that. My brother was getting into skating because he needed to learn how to skate so he didn't look silly, I guess, on the ice with his friends at school. And just like every little sister, I was like, well, I want to do what my big brother's doing. And of course, I was always competitive with my big brother, which he would not have the same words to say about me. He didn't like how competitive I was because I just wanted to be better than him. I think that was my only goal. And then basically from there, my competitive spirit just drove me into competing. Ended up going to the national level for figure skating, both in singles and in dance. My brother actually ended up being my dance partner, which is a totally different story in itself. I would recommend this to any parent listening or watching this right now. Do not put your children into a sport where they have to look into each other's eyes and quote unquote look like you want to, make love to the person, because that's what dance and tango and all of the. That is just not doesn't make for a great future. So
makes for therapy bills.
Oh my gosh, totally. Again, another story. So we competed together, and I competed for about 10 years at the competitive national level, and then ended up facing a pretty serious injury, which led me into the boxing ring. Long story short.
So were you headed towards an Olympic run on the ice before your accident?
Yeah, so that was my dream. It was definitely the pathway I was on. I was 14 years old at the time when I was at the senior level, which would be the highest level you can be for singles. I was junior national with my brother as a dance partner. I think that if I'd stayed on track with the sport, that was kind of those were the steps I was taking. So provincial, national, international competition. However, I was lacking now looking back, I was lacking a lot of the components that I found out just before this interview, that Graham's mother was a judge. So maybe she might have been able to give a little more insight. But I think that I was lacking at 14 years old. I think I was lacking on some of the the merit that you have the artistic merit and you have the technical. Technical, I was great, but artistically, I was not necessarily, the performer I am today that can get cut up and cut in half on stage and then come out in one piece. I wasn't there yet as a 14-year-old. So on the pathway, yes, but not necessarily there quite yet.
Fair enough. And you said there was an accident that took you away from the skating world, though. I don't want to go, dig up too many painful memories, but can you tell us a little bit about the accident?
Yeah.
And how that led you into boxing?
It led me into boxing, and more importantly, led me into, I think, a leadership coaching role within the sport of boxing, and has defined the person I am today. So long story short on that one, I fractured my C3 when I was figure skating at 14 years old as a result of a fall. However, probably the fracture didn't occur until the coaching team that I was working with encouraged me to continue pushing through the symptoms of what I had already injured myself doing. I was feeling some numbness in my hands, numbness in my feet. And it was that turning point in life when you realize that your coaches, or as a coach, you are, 100% that person who is in control, and it's a very big responsibility. And as a 14-year-old, child who had only dreams of going to the Olympics, I had no friends, I had, very little family, and the only goal I had was to go to the Olympics. So I would listen without question to my coaches. And if the coach says keep going, I'm going to keep going. So I think that was a very, pivotal moment in my life to learn how important it is to, realize your responsibility, but also, even if you have doubts that that athlete or that person, really is feeling any kind of pain, or, maybe they're over exaggerating, you know what? Better be safe than sorry. And my motto actually now as a referee and judge, which I'm sure we're going to get to, is I would rather stop 1,000 bouts too soon than one bout too late. And that is 100% how I operate in life as a coach, as a person, as an official. And I think that that is something that I will never, regret my experience that I went through as a 14-year-old athlete, because it really has defined the way that I'll treat people now.
So for those at home who don't have a degree in kinesiology, there, your C3, that's up here, right? That's in the neck.
Yeah, so it's the spot that between your C3 and C4 that if you sever that nerve, you are now quadriplegic. So the reason I was feeling numbness in my hands and my feet was because there was a pinching from
pressure.
The inflammation.
Yeah.
So I spent about 2 months in hospital. The recovery was actually quite quick considering. I was in traction, and for those of you guys who don't know what traction is, you see people in those halos. Well, before you get into one of those halos, you're in bed and you have weights attached to your neck, and you're on Valium, you're on a lot of medication to try to relax the muscles to be able to make sure that the recovery happens in a way that doesn't compress that nerve. So it's an experience in itself. I was at Sick Kids Hospital. I have so much grateful feelings towards everything and the help that I received when I was there. And it's an experience that you don't wish on anybody, but if you look for silver linings, it's definitely made me the person I am today.
So you ended up turning to boxing as part of the rehab from this injury, correct?
Kind of.
Because I'm trying to follow the headspace going, all right, well, I've had a neck fracture, so again, I'm going to turn as a therapeutic rehab, getting punched in the head repeatedly. I'm seeing a disconnect here. Like, walk me through that decision.
So, again, very long story short, I found my way into a boxing club during the rehab. So it wasn't part of the rehab, but during my rehab. And the funds that were supposed to be used towards that and the timing that was supposed to be used towards the rehab, I kind of shifted into boxing myself as a personal decision at 17 years old. So between the ages of 16 and 17. I did try to go, actually, the transition really was that I went back to skating, tried to do it for a little while, tried to coach for a little while, found out that the politics in figure skating actually far outweigh the politics in boxing. I wasn't loving the sport. I was loving the aspect of coaching and, helping and being the person that I was in the sport, but not necessarily loving the sport that I was in anymore. I think I recognized that it wasn't a healthy sport. It wasn't a healthy mentality for me to be pursuing. But I didn't know what I was doing when I walked into the boxing gym and just started hitting things and was like, wow, this is incredible. And, I just, being the competitive person I am, was like, well, it's not enough that I hit stuff. I want to see where this can take me. Can I go to the Olympics? And interestingly enough, at that time, I found out the Olympics didn't exist for women at that time when I first got involved with it. So, my pathways changed, and, I still feel like I miss being an athlete, and I will take every opportunity I can to compete in whatever I can compete in. But yeah, that was the kind of transition for me. And it happened. And I was very lucky to be resourceful enough to find my way through at the time, because there wasn't very many resources for athletes, especially young athletes and especially female athletes in the sport at the time.
Okay, and I do want to talk definitely about the coaching and about the boxing club as well. But just before we get to that, let's just circle back real quickly to getting sawn in half. For a living. So when we're not boxing, we are traveling the world as a magician's assistant for Richard Forget. Correct me if I'm wrong on that one.
Yeah, you got it right. I would call him Forget, because he always forgets everything.
Well, I was trying not to. I had to think about it before I said it out loud. Graham and I both like to think that we're fairly well-traveled people. We've both easily got at least a dozen countries under our belts over the years, moving around. But you're lapping us. You're doing circles around us with the travel you've done with Richard Forget as well as a referee. So, how did you end up as a magician's assistant?
So I would say that, all of that technical merit that I was gaining points in when I was skating was great. And then I was lacking in the artistic merit. There's those two components, a judge sport as well. And at 18 years old, I got this opportunity. One of my friends, I kind of went wayward from the ages 15 to about 21 when I started my boxing gym. I was in this, I was a really fun person to know. I was everywhere, anywhere. I would take any job that I could get. It was fun. It was dangerous. I, had anything from motorcycle accidents to traveling with my magician to, Egypt. And it's incredible. So I found my way to this magician through a friend of mine who, told me one day, hey, I found this job off of a Kijiji ad or something along those lines. And she's a dancer. And I said, what is it? And she told me, well, I'm going to be traveling with this magician. First, we're going to go to LA. And then I'm going to, I don't know if you guys have heard of the Magic Castle in LA. It's a very popular venue there. So she was going to LA. Then she went to perform for the Prince of Monte Carlo. And then she ended up in France and on the Plus Grand Cabaret du Monde, which is like a very incredible TV show that since has been canceled, I think, but it had a good 50 years, I believe, not maybe 40 years of airtime across the world. And, so she had this incredible lineup of this travel. And I mean, up until I was 15, I'd never really left North America. So I was like, oh my gosh, tell me how I can get involved with this. How do I do this? I'm a dancer. I've got my background. And she said, well, listen, if I ever can't make it on a trip, I'll let you know. Well, she ended up quitting halfway through the tour. And she was like, hey, Jen, I got this great opportunity because I went to LA to stay in LA. I found a guy and I'm going to go get married to him. For reasons we don't know, but it's so she decided she was gonna move to LA in the middle of the tour. So I ended up filling her spot in. So I kind of fell into that as well, and just have become. Richard Forget is now one of my, I would say, best friends, longest time friends for sure. And he basically, it's a real trust when you're traveling with someone like that. I'd lied about my age. Talking about trust, I told him that I was 25 or 26 because I thought that was like the age where people can trust people. I'm like, yeah, 18 years old, he's not going to take me on tour with him, but 26, for sure. So wow. I ended up telling him that I was 26 years old, and he believed it. And I think he told me he was like 40 and he might have been like 50. So I believed it. And then later on, we've known each other for 16 years now, and he, has divulged to me since his actual age. I've let him know my real age, and I caught up to my real age. So that was good. But yeah, so that's how that happened, and I've been around the world and back again with him, multiple times, thanks to an incredible journey that he's, taken me on, and I love it.
Now, in preparation for having this conversation with you today, I did take some time and watch a few of his videos as well, just to kind of get an idea of the sort of thing that you're doing. And it is not, your traditional just, get in the box, you've been sawn in half sort of stuff. We have progressed a little bit farther. And I noticed that you are able to work a lot of your athleticism into his show as well as the skating. I did see a clip or two with you on skates on stage as part of that show. So do you still train at all in skating or dance, or do you find that the time that you spend in the boxing gym is keeping you fit and limber enough to meet with the demands of the show?
Well, listen, I'm in my 30s now, and somebody told me, it might have been my mother, that, when you turn 30 or when you turn 40, your body's not going to do what it does. You don't bounce back as fast. So when I'm on tour with Rich, so actually the last tour I took was the end of 2019, like many people, and I didn't realize the last tour I was going to be on last time. I was going to be performing for quite a long time. And I get a lot of every show, sometimes 2 shows per day, I will get on the stage and I'll be skating. And luckily it's not too intense. I think it's like a total of 1 minute. And if you've watched any of Richard's acts, he's considered a stage illusionist. So he's not, necessarily doing all of the girl get into the box, get chopped up. It's very theatrical. And I have to say that it opened my eyes. I had no idea. When you hear a magician, you're waiting for a trick. People ask me all the time, hey, can you do something? And I can do stuff. I'm horrible. That's why I'm the assistant. And it's a great contrast to the life that I live here in Canada around the world as an official, because I'm really not that important on stage, but it's what I do kind of side stage or behind the scenes that makes the show happen. So it is pretty cool. I do keep in shape when I'm on tour, and then when I'm here in the gym lately, because we've been shut down from COVID, I'm not as in good of shape, and my body is definitely feeling the lack of activity. But I do work the activity into my life. I have a really hard time doing things if it's not for a purpose. So, going and skating around, my gym, for example, to try to practice for a show would be what I typically do, or, holding pads for an athlete and feeling like I'm actually working out because I need to. That's easy for me because that's what an athlete does. They do things for a purpose. Now to go on a treadmill or to lift weights or wake up and do push-ups, like, I'm having a hard time. I'm not going to lie. I'm having a hard time motivating myself because the outcome is not necessarily, there's nothing in sight right now. So I have to get past that mental block as well. So I struggle with a lot of the same things that our clients struggle with.
So let's talk about your clients. Let's talk about the gym. You started Kingsway Boxing Club in 2006. Now, you walked into the gym, you said you hit a few things, and then you had, that was your light bulb moment. You said, this is what I want to take my boundless energy and direct it towards, is boxing. So what was the decision to open your own club as opposed to just training out of other clubs?
You know what, and this is something I've spoken about in previous interviews. It's very funny to think that, one thought will lead to so many different outcomes. And my thought process at the time when I first started boxing was, I need my own gym so that I can train and get myself to, go pro or to represent my country, or, I really thought, and I mean, that sounds silly, and it is, if you look at, now that I know the realistic pathway and the journey you have to take to become an elite boxer, I was going down the completely wrong road for the, or the right road for the wrong reason. So I think that what happened was I really thought that I needed my own space to turn pro. And it wasn't this. It wasn't, you're sitting inside of, 4,000 square foot gym right now. But, it wasn't that. It was my apartment at the time. And I just wanted to find a way to, all of this time I was traveling with a magician. I was working nightclubs. I used to be a nightclub security. I was riding my motorcycles. I used to own a motorcycle shop. I was, trying to work out. I was trying to train. I was trying to compete. And I thought, okay, well, what do I do to consolidate all of that into one spot? Get my clients, I was a personal trainer on top of that, get my clients to come to me so that I can actually put more time into training myself. So that was the intention. But what happens when you start a business, and you guys, I'm sure you can contest to any of this, when you start a business, you're not in it for yourself anymore. You're in it for the community, or you're in it for the people that you're trying to take care of. And that shift was another accident that was an incredible outcome, because I basically ended up with a boxing gym that I outgrew within 2 months, and I had to open another location and then another location. And it was purely by accident, but with the best intentions. So I think that's something that will always sit in the back of my mind, is as long as you have the right intentions, you've got your core values, that, the outcomes that come from it, I don't think I'm as goal oriented, for lack of a better kind of explanation, as I used to be. I'm more, here's where I want to go right now, especially with COVID. Here's where I want to go right now. And whatever outcomes that are great from there, the byproduct of that action will be, I'll be proud of.
Very cool. So what space do you find that the Kingsway Boxing Club is filling in this industry that we're not seeing in other gyms? What's setting Kingsway apart?
Again, probably another mistake that is incredible was that, and it's not a mistake. I'm using the word mistake only because it wasn't purposeful action. 5 years into opening my gym, it was 2011. I decided that, I don't feel good because I'm paying my rent. I'm not struggling. I was used to struggling. I was used to, where I'm going to find this money to pay my rent. And the rent's very expensive in Toronto. I had 2 locations, not because, I wanted to grow bigger, but because I ran out of space. And, I wanted to pay my rent, and I was doing that. And by 5 years into my gym, I was like, well, I've got my rent and surplus. I felt guilty. What am I going to do with this money? The only reason I have this money coming in is because the clients of mine and my boxers, they believe in me, and they believe in the vision, and they buy in, and they support, and they invest in this thing that I've created. And I had this guilt that, well, what am I giving back to them? Yeah, sure, I'm a great, I'm a great coach, if I don't say so myself, but is that enough? And it wasn't for me. So that was actually when I took the step into starting the fight to end cancer. Again, didn't realize how big it was going to become. It was with the intention of, and I'm sure this is probably going to come up in the interview, but it was the intention. It was the intention of supporting one of our members directly, and then as well, a fight that doesn't just affect myself and the people that were important to me at the moment, but it affects the community. But I had no idea how big of a movement that was going to become. And 10 years later now, it's definitely become one of the main things of what represents Kingsway. So bring it back to your question, what separates Kingsway from maybe the rest of the boxing gyms? I think boxing gyms are incredible. I have nothing to say that would be negative against any other boxing gym. And other gyms are doing very, similar, but maybe different things to invest back in the community. But I think that our theme, while I wish we had more competitive athletes right now, we had a more competitive program. I think the reason why we're still here during COVID, where we haven't been open, like this is as empty as it's been for the past 4 months, and then we had the first shutdown as well, is not because of our competitive programs, which would be great, but because of the investment we make into the community. And, anything that goes beyond what we need to pay rent always ends up investing back into our programs that give back, or into Fight to End Cancer, that is really for not the sport of boxing, but, definitely has good outcomes for that sport.
We're definitely going to talk a little bit about the charity a little later on, so we will circle back to that one for sure. How your early experience as a growing up as a very competitive athlete. Now we know we covered that as it was figure skating at the time, not boxing. But how, and being pushed through an injury, how has that affected your coaching style when you're dealing with young fighters now in your gym?
My coaching style and even my officiating style. So, I mean, that's the other side of what I do with boxing outside of the gym and outside of this country. I'm traveling the world, refereeing and judging. And, the refereeing side is, again, what I said, our motto was to, I'd rather stop 1,000 fights too early than one fight too late. That is, essentially my experience as an athlete. I'm very competitive. So I have to say I've grown a lot as a coach, because I could only see things through the lens that I understood, sports to be. And I was a very competitive athlete, coached by, Russians and by Eastern European, the mentality. And it really is a different mentality. You go to Eastern Europe, you go to Cuba, and they have a playbook. And if you don't play by that book, there's no place for you. And I think that was my mentality when I first came into coaching. It was like that's all I understood. But I still move forward with the understanding that this is a big responsibility, and that no matter what my impact, it needs to be positive, because the impact I had from a lot of the coaches I worked with and the outcomes that you are now aware of that I endured were because the coaches kind of would run through you, and if you weren't good for them or weren't good enough for elite, then you weren't good enough for anything in their realm of the world. So I think that the one thing that I took from that was that every single person who walks into my gym, anyone who I work with as a coach, anyone who leaves their session, even if it's just, their very first and only session they'll ever do as a boxer, they need to feel not only good about themselves, but like they've taken something away from it that's constructive, and I'm proud of them for even just stepping into the ring. And I think that's probably, as a coach, what I've taken from being coached and from being an elite athlete, because that transition is a horrible transition that every elite athlete will face at some point in their life. Even if it's on the best of, cases, best circumstances. I mean, you look at Tiger Woods, hopefully he gets back into golfing. But I mean, usually there's some form of tragedy that is associated with the end of somebody's career. And a lot of the times it has to do with just not being selected for a team. And this is kind of the transitional process that I hope to help with athletes in the future.
Well, that's excellent. Now, you mentioned just a moment ago that the other side of what you're working on here is obviously the refereeing and the judging side. So, we the fight fans, we rarely kind of spare a thought for the officials and the referees. They're often these faceless people in the ring or next to the ring that we, the viewers, the fans, from the comfort of our living rooms and online, like to hurl abuse at. This could be a pretty thankless job. So what made you jump, into that side of things as opposed to staying in the fighter's corner and sticking to coaching?
Well,
I've definitely screamed, possibly at my TV, possibly at you during the African Olympic qualifiers a few years ago, for example, among other large tournaments that you've been a part of. So I've done some screaming, and I apologize.
It's funny you bring that tournament up, especially. That was in Cameroon in 2015, and that was one of the qualifiers for the Rio 2016 Olympics. That was a really tough one for me, just because you're dealing with some of the most elite athletes, and in countries that are you're not in your country. People don't care who you are now, especially with COVID. You're gonna be wearing a mask, so in some ways I might be able to hide behind that mask a little bit better. I don't want to hide behind what I do. I'm very proud of what I do with the athletes and the purpose that provides. They always say the difference between training versus competition is the referee, because if you don't have somebody there, the referees and judges, then you're just practicing. For me, I think one of the biggest influences for me to get into officiating and stick with it and really continue with it was the fact that, I didn't feel like I was on the best end of the decisions as a judge sport in figure skating. I never felt like those decisions were really fair. And I am also the type of person who doesn't want to necessarily complain about something without trying to do something to make it better. So I realized after my first, competition, judging or refereeing, I think it was, that it's not that easy. It's not so cut and dry. And it's a big responsibility. It's a big job, and it's a very important one. And I guess, again, the competitive nature that I have, I wanted to, experience and keep on, helping and providing the expertise that I had as an athlete, as an understanding the sport. And really, I do have a very good understanding, especially now, very good understanding of the sport. And how do I translate that back to the sport, giving back, but also maybe explaining, that's actually one of the next initiatives I have right now is within our province, within Canada as well, explaining to the coaches, to the athletes, what it is that we're looking for. Because I think that's the biggest part of the game is if you don't understand the rules or what the judges are looking for, how are you going to win that? And that was my problem as an athlete. So that's kind of how it sort of continued to grow for me, and that desire in me made me realize that I can make a much bigger difference through my work as an official than even as a coach, though I still coach.
Cool. So how long did it take you from the time that you started refereeing and judging to work your way up to being the first female 3-star referee and judge for the AIBA in North America? How long was that process for you?
It was actually a really short process. I think I'm very lucky. I think that there's some luck when it comes to, there's a huge amount of luck when it comes to, I would say the top of anything. I mean, you look at athletes, that might be one thing, but if you look at like actors or people, even what I'm doing with my magician, like how many dancers are there that are 100% better than I am at dancing, who haven't gotten these incredible opportunities to become, professional dancers with a magician, traveling around the world or going on tour? How many officials are there like myself, like hundreds, millions of officials like myself, who never would have been seen by the right people at the right moment and maybe be the right gender within the right time of the world to be able to step into these positions? So I very, very luckily got set up. I started refereeing or officiating in and around the 2009 time. I had to look at my book to verify those dates. And then by 2014, I was considered a 3-star official because I was actually fast-tracked and upgraded into, it was called the Extraordinary, I think, R&J program through IABA. I forget the exact thing, but that they sent me to, Canada sent me to Cuba because I was just upgraded by officials who came into Canada and said, well, we kind of want to work with her. And they realized there was a need for more women in the sport because in 2012, that was actually the progression. In 2012 was when the first women were included in the sport of boxing in the Olympics. So there became this need for officials in the Olympic level who were women, and that need was not there before. Therefore, if I'd come in years before, maybe I wouldn't have been looked at, or if I quit years before, then I definitely wouldn't have been seen by the right people at the right time. So it was a pretty quick transition.
Yeah. So by the time you did make it to that 3-star level, did you find that the AIBA were welcoming you with open arms at that point, eager to show how progressive they were being? Or was this still a bit of an uphill battle in what has traditionally been a male-dominated sport?
I think it's still an uphill battle because it is still a male-dominated sport. However, interesting fact that we're looking at right now in Canada is that the majority of our athletes who are medaling at the international level are women. So while it is predominantly a male sport and amateur, and while we still have many more male athletes in the sport or much more representation of male in the sport, we really honestly are doing much better and progressing quite farther in the sport because of the women that we have involved. So it's still an uphill battle. I was welcomed in, I think, maybe for different reasons. I would say that I'm very easy to get along with. I think that's just something that, I love people, and I will find love for people no matter who they are, what they say, or how they interact and how they treat me even, which can be to my detriment. So there were a lot of, I would say, struggles that happened when I first got in, especially in 2014. 2015 would be the lead up to the 2016 Olympics. There were some very public outcomes after the 2016 Olympics with corruption and situations that I faced firsthand. And it was definitely, a lot of it had to do, the treatment that maybe I had to do with being a female. And I would say that the people that maybe gave me the treatment would argue that, they were exceptionally welcoming to me because I was female. But again, it would just be an different interpretation. So it's still quite a struggle because we're not just dealing with Canadians. If I was just dealing with Canadians, that would be a different story. I'm very welcomed in Canada. But when you're dealing with other countries that are still not as progressive, there's still countries like Cuba who do not have an elite female program that would have any women because, quote unquote, their women are too beautiful to get into the sport and they wouldn't want to see and there are women who are competing, but they're not necessarily taken at the national. They don't have a national, not yet. They don't have a national team for women yet.
So that's something that Graham and I have talked about a few times on this segment, as well as on our Friday night panels, is about normalizing the experience of seeing women in combative sports. Now, I know in 2018, I believe you were the Canadian delegate for the first AIBA Gender Equality Forum in Sofia, Bulgaria. And I believe you also currently sit on Boxing Canada's Gender Equity Advisory Group. So what is being done to facilitate this normalization, and where do we, more importantly, what can we be doing better?
I think this conversation in itself, the fact that I'm having it with a male, I would use the term, preaching to the choir when I went to Bulgaria, for example, this incredible concept with incredible speakers. There was Gabriela Mendoza, and I'm probably pronouncing her name wrong, but she led this group for the whole weekend, but it was all women. They had a meeting before with all the executives from all the delegates from all the countries, which were male.
How can you have an equality meeting and only invite half the people?
You can't.
It doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, and that's actually, she put out a really great meme the other day where it just showed equality and equity is not all women and one man. And it's not, all men and one woman. It's neither of those. And there's a major difference between equity and equality, which, that would be a whole other interview in itself. And I would say I'm an advocate. I would, I've been labeled as a feminist, and I actually wouldn't necessarily, I think that it's a very strong label, and I don't necessarily, I don't not identify as a feminist, but at the same time, I really advocate for, fair treatment. I'm so lucky that I believe that I've been given so many great opportunities in fair treatment, because I had blinders on and I had no idea that a lot of this stuff was going on, or that even some of the things I endured were, very unequitable, experiences. But with the blinders on, I didn't feel them or see them at the time. And if I now, with what I understand, what I see, and what I acknowledge, if I don't do something or take a step up and try to make sure that, this treatment doesn't continue, or that more opportunities are not available, I think that I would be considered complicit in the issue that we have at hand. And that's part of why I've taken that step. What can be done? We can talk more. We can support more. There's still a major gap with, they always say, they being, the media always says, there's not enough need for there to be as much exposure for women. Let's use boxing, for example. You're not going to see as many female fights. You're starting to see them sometimes. International Women's Day, we had, all these women on one card. It was incredible. It was great, as a kind of, here we go, here's what we're doing, which is great. And I think that there's going to be more like that. But the argument is that, well, no one's really watching the female boxing. Well, if you're not putting it out there for people to watch, and you're not putting it out there for, young women and, young girls or young boys to, and men to watch, how do they know what they want to watch? So it's very media bias, like, to say that, who's going to watch it. You have to put it out there so people can see it. And, it's just,
we need better access to opportunity.
Exactly. So what's being done, Sport Canada, at least, is mandating a minimum 40% of leadership roles being allotted to women. And that is happening as of 2022, which is part of why, and that's next year. That's part of why I'm sitting on this advisory group at this moment. It's not considered a committee yet, but we're trying to work to ensure that we create the educative processes, and we, help get the women who would be the proper people to put in these positions, not just, filling spots, but getting people who are engaged, involved, and smart and educated to make helpful decisions and, a progressive sport. So that's part of what's happening. And it's going to happen very quickly, and it has to be a mandate, because unless you mandate it, it doesn't happen. And so that's kind of the next step. It's going to be interesting to see what happens, but I'm excited to be a part of that process.
Yeah, no, that sounds amazing. I did have a list here of awards and honors and all kinds of stuff that I was going to get into you. I mean, I know you know what they are. I was going to tell other people what they were. Most recently, the IOC, the International Olympic Committee, gave you the Women in Sport Achievement for 2020. Now, I don't have time to go into all this because we are running a bit short on time. So I wanted to congratulate you on that. But I did want to shift. There was a couple other things I wanted to get into today, but we've got a lot of ground to cover. So what I would like you to take some time with here and for our viewers is tell us about the fight to end cancer. Because apparently you had sworn off sleep. You needed something else to fill your time. You were getting bored. The fight to end cancer in partnership with Princess Margaret Hospital. Tell us all about it. Tell us how we can get involved.
Okay, so I know we're pressed for time, so I see underneath my
No, you take all the time you need for this. This is important.
Thank you so much. So, fighttoendcancer.com, you're going to see a lot of things, and it's a lot of scattered things, because what it represents is not my fight. It represents the fight that we're all faced with, whether it's as a supporter for somebody who's going through cancer, ourselves, a survivor who's going through cancer, or somebody we've lost to cancer. And while COVID has eclipsed every part of the world's problems right now, it really has, it's the forefront of everybody's, discussion, fears, and, efforts to try to make sure we get through this. It actually hasn't stopped any of the problems, including cancer and cancer treatments. And we work very closely with the Princess Margaret Cancer Foundation because their mandate is actually international. They're one of the top 5 global researchers and basically provide treatments around the world. And that was right here in our backyard. It was also the reason she was the person who I was fighting for. She was getting treatments there. They're absolutely incredible. But now, because of COVID, they're struggling even more. And it makes me want to fight even harder. However, we now, just like everybody else, have to pivot the fight that we were doing. So we used to, what the Fight to End Cancer is in a nutshell, it represents a fight year round. And essentially we would pick people from, different, you guys could fight. You guys could fight each other. Yeah, I could fight you. Actually, I can't fight you. It's a sanctioned fight. So basically we take people, 10 people per year, and they have no boxing experience, one of the criteria. And we get them to step into the ring, box against each other, compete against each other in a sanctioned boxing match, while actually fighting for the same goal, which is to raise funds for cancer research at the Princess Margaret Cancer Foundation in support of the hospital. And
now there's some training involved there as well, though. It's not just putting Graham in the ring who's never boxed before and watch him flail against the CEO of some company.
Exactly. No, we the other mandate I have as an official, as somebody who wants to protect people within the sport of boxing, is to ensure that it's a safe sport and that we represent boxing and we highlight and we showcase boxing as a sport that it really is. Because realistically, an amateur, we don't look at the injuries inside the ring the same as maybe a pro fight would be looking for. Our goal is not knockouts; it's points driven. So it's not the same. So education is part of what we do with the Fight to End Cancer as well. So we want to educate the people involved, the people watching, while still the outcome being that we raise the most funds we can to ensure that cancer is ended in our lifetime. And that is really what our vision, our goal, and our mission comes down to. And we've already raised we've donated 1.5 million to the Princess Margaret. It's slowed down because of COVID. Thanks. And we are now looking at pivoting, and the next strategy that we have to try to deal with these times, because it's really hard to ask people for money when they don't really have money. I mean, even us, we're relying on government support. You don't pay the bills by an empty gym. You don't pay the bills, through empty stores, and that's the reality we're all facing right now. So how do you keep fighting for something that's incredibly important to not just me, but the future of what is facing our community? And, I'll be long gone, but this fight hopefully will still be fighting. How do you keep that going at a time right now where it's so critical? And then, there onward. So you will get back to the fight for sure by hopefully next year. And we have a roster of fighters waiting to compete. But in the meantime, we've launched.
You're going to have to wait, Graham.
Yeah, not yet. We've got time to train you yet.
Darn.
So
that might be one of those fights one of those 1,000 fights you might have to stop a little early.
Well, I'll keep my eye on it. And I mean, as long as you make it into the ring, then you've done your part, because all of the hard work as a fighter for Fight to End Cancer is done before your fight. Just like I don't want to massacre Muhammad Ali's quote, but the essence is that the majority of all of the fight is completed before you actually step into the ring. And that is exactly how it is for the Fight to End Cancer. All the fighters, all the sponsors, the supporters, they're all raising funds leading up to that fight. And then the fight is just a celebration. So we would never let anyone get hurt during that process. But now what we're doing is offering, we're just working on it right now. So if you go to our site, you're not going to see this yet. But hopefully we'll be able to launch it by, I would say, end of May, the FTech shop. So you can actually wear your support now. And by wearing a t-shirt or wearing a face mask or, putting on a pair of gloves that actually, say defeat is not an option, which is our motto, you're supporting the fight to end cancer. You're still continuing to drive funds and support and just awareness to the cause and keeping the fight alive, which is right now just the same as what all the businesses are trying to do, is stay alive. We want to try to keep the fight going so that the people who are still fighting for their lives have something to, relax. They can focus on themselves because we're still fighting for them.
Okay, so do you have to definitely let us know once the products go live, and we can will let our viewership know once they are live, and we'll be able to direct them to the website. I'm sure if you're watching at home right now, you can see just below Jennifer there, the fighttoendcancer.com is the website. Please go check it out. How can people get involved though? Is sponsorship, volunteers? Is there what can they be doing before the merch goes live? What can we be doing?
Right now we have, if you do go to our website, you'll see the donation portion. We're aware that donations are really tough right now, but even $2, $1. We had a young girl who brought in her coins from her, it was her piggy bank. She just emptied her piggy bank. It was pennies. I don't even think we use pennies anymore, but you know what? Every penny counts. And I know that sounds so like commercial, every penny, your pennies count. They do. I've watched those pennies, those young kids who are doing lemonade stands during COVID, them bringing those funds to us. That is still something. And it's so much gratitude from the hospital and from the doctors. We still work very close with the doctors, and we hear from them, just so grateful that we're still fighting. And those funds, they add up. Every penny adds up. And that's how we didn't get to 1.5 million by, large, huge lump sum donations. We got to them by $5, $20, 20 cents here and there. So the donation you can get involved with, and then we are definitely looking for sponsors. So if you're Amazon, or if you're those companies that are doing really well right now, work the community into your mandate. Work the community, and it's not good enough to say we support the community. We have to actually take action, and that's what my goal as a business, as an entrepreneur who has decided that even while I struggle to pay the rent, I will still make sure if there's any money coming in, certain money goes into that fund. That's our future. And, I might not be there to see the outcome of it. I really hope that we can end cancer in our lifetime. However, we will end cancer in our lifetimes if we all fight for the same goal.
Absolutely brilliant. Now, just before we sign off here, I do have one last question for you, and we like to throw these ones around just to throw a bit of a curveball here. So we ask, so we ask, and Big Mike from Knuckle Up with Mike Orr 4 likes this question a lot. As in, we haven't had a ref or a judge weigh in on this one. You're obviously better acquainted with the Queensbury rules than anyone else we've talked to here. If you could propose one rule change in boxing, what would you see? What would you like to see? Now, I know Big Mike, he is forever, and he likes to do this from, again, the comfort of his couch. He does not like the standing 8 count. And he also wants to see 4-ounce gloves on everyone's hands, but he doesn't hear when people say that's just, I know.
We're going bare knuckle, guys. We're going bare knuckle.
If you'd let him, he would. If you'd let him, he would. But it'd be nothing but broken knuckles.
Let Big Mike jump into the ring with me first, and then we'll see if he still wants to go bare knuckle.
I would pay money to see that. If we can set that up for the fight to end cancer, I would definitely pay good money to see that. But what rule change would you like to see happen in boxing?
So in amateur boxing, the standing 8 count, I will always argue to keep that there. The purpose of the standing 8 count is to, in amateur boxing, support that athlete to ensure that we can, ensure certain things like safety before you get knocked out. So that is the purpose of the standing 8 count. I will stand by that 100%. And yes, while it gets misused a lot because new referees or even experienced referees may misinterpret, a stumble for an 8 count, I would still rather stop 1,000 by accident than one too late that ends up being a death or, a severe injury. So, and that comes from being a very, severely injured athlete. So that one I won't agree with him on, but
nobody has yet.
Oh, good. Okay, that's good to hear.
Nobody has yet, but he keeps gunning for it.
Yeah, he does.
Well, tell him to come have a talk with me, and I'll give him a couple standing 8 counts, and we'll see how he feels about them. So
we're bringing our cameras for that.
I've been giving a lot of thought to the. Perfect. I love it. I've given a lot of thought to what it is that's going to make, because I believe the biggest problem in amateur sport is judging. I really do believe that, and I believe the biggest problem in amateur boxing, and this is coming from a judge, is the construct of what we've created with judging. Now, I do believe that the system has been definitely modified and fixed a lot for the lead up to Tokyo. So Tokyo is coming up. The IOC, the boxing task force from the IOC, it's the very first time, I believe, in history that the IOC, the International Olympic Committee, has taken on the entire mechanics and sanctioning for boxing. So they are the ones who created or who selected the officials. They're the ones who are going to sanction the sport. That hasn't happened. There's usually an ISO that it takes care of that.
Yeah, this is an ad hoc task force being run by the head of the gymnastics department, I believe, in Japan.
Yeah.
So.
Yes, exactly. Well, in the IOC. So what I think would actually help as an official, and has helped me as an official, would be the mandatory, you've got 1 minute break for those athletes to, rest up and catch their breath and get, 1 or 2 pointers from their coaches. Well, why not impose the mandatory explanation? It's a judge sport still. So, there's a criteria, the Queensberry rules. We're on a 10-point must system. Anything around a 9 to 10 score means that we've gone down our criteria to technique and tactics. Well, why not impose a mandatory description? It could be just a few words, a sentence, as to how did you get to a 9-10 for X athlete, and what criteria did you use? And hold those judges accountable for what it is that they're actually judging. And they do.
So show your work on. Don't just give me the answer. Show your work.
Exactly.
How did you tell me how you got to that card? Okay.
Yeah. So we got a minute to do that. So during that minute, we have to sit there and look at nothing. Don't look at each other, because you don't want to have any kind of signals or any kind of issues like that. And I get that, because there was a lot of cheating that was happening, and that's very public, public information. But
that's why we have the boxing task force right now. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So writing down what it is and how you got there, or maybe having a selection process by which you can do that, or submit your, answer as to what you did and how you got there. I think that will hold the judges accountable. Maybe not, but at the very least, they can be reviewed, and this goes for pro as well. They can be reviewed if they come to a completely wrong answer as to, a wrong decision that is so obviously they watch a different fight. Then it gives also the people we have supervisors as well, to the opportunity to be able to change those people or educate them better at what their job actually represents, because there usually is a correct answer. And a lot of the times when you see those, decisions that come out that you're like, what was that person watching? How does that make any sense? It's because they got to the incorrect answer with the incorrect criteria.
A well thought out answer, and honestly not the way I thought I was going to go, but that is you make a brilliant point there, and we usually think of it from terms of inside the ring, what we would like to see changed, but that's a brilliant point about what's going on outside the ring and stuff we're not always taking into account. Jennifer Huggins, thank you so much for joining us today. Fight fans at home, join the fight to end cancer. Website's on your screen right now. Get involved any way you can. Once we get back to actual fighting, let's see some sponsors, let's see some volunteers, let's see some fighters out there, and we will let you know as soon as the merch goes live for the Fight to End Cancer, and you can support that way. Thank you so much for taking the time with us today, Jen.
Thanks, guys. Thank you so much.